Okay, this video is the most memorable thing said in vegan history. This is 2025. I've made this lecture previously where I've added a lot of new stuff to it. Okay, so here we go. So most memorable lines in nutrition history. First of all, we'll start off with Dr. McDougall. All healthy populations eat a starch-based diet. No exceptions. Humans are starchivores. Okay, by the way, that's a big thing McDougall says, is that you should eat a starch-based diet, and that's unique. Notice you won't see any of the other sort of famous nutrition experts out there saying that. But that's the most important thing to know. If you didn't know anything else, but eat 90% of your calories from starch, 5% from fruits and vegetables, you would probably do quite well. That's valuable information. That's another sign why, McDougall was real and he's really trying to help you. A lot of the other ones out there, they know a lot. They'll tell you some good stuff that's valuable, but a lot of times they're playing like what I would call a 70-30 game. 70% good information, 30% BS to sell you stuff or, make their sponsors happy. Okay, McDougall continues. To start out, you should eat 90% of your calories from starch and 5% each from fruits and vegetables. The more starch people eat, the healthier they become. If you are trying to lose weight, then eat a higher percentage of calories from vegetables, up to 50% of your calories from veggies. But that's the most. You can't eat more than that or you'll get sick. You haven't tried the ultimate in nutritional therapy until you've eaten only sweet potatoes for 4 months. Sweet potatoes are pretty unique. The Papua New Guinea population ate 93% of their calories from sweet potatoes. They're real fit and strong. It has only 4.5% of calories from protein, so it's really low in protein. So that's a way to lower your protein intake. They're super low in fat, 1% of calories from fat. So that should make you skinny. That should help you figure out, you're not going to be allergic to that or react to that. Okay, Dennis Burkitt, he said, high fiber diet protects patients from abdominal pressure syndrome. Yeah, he figured out abdominal pressure syndrome. The back pressure from straining at defecation causes hiatal hernia. Your stomach comes up into your chest, gastroesophageal reflux, etc. Diverticulitis, diverticulosis, appendicitis, all those things, abdominal pressure syndrome, are due to a lack of dietary fiber, as well as many other problems, leaky gut, varicose veins, hemorrhoids, varicocele, etc. Durian Ryder, sugar is the most powerful performance enhancer for your brain, your muscles, and your dong. Okay, me. Fruits taste great, but are less filling than starches. It's a paraphrase of McDougall. I was kind of playing on that old poem. Taste great, less filling was the old light beer commercial. McDougall points this out, that starches are much more satiating. They satisfy hunger much better than do fruits. I still like fruits, but I'll tend to overeat them. I have entire lectures on fruits. Okay, lipids. Caldwell Esselstyn, no oil, not one drop. Moderation kills. Yeah, I've seen that too. The typical stupid chump will say, well, I'm cutting down on meat, I'm cutting down on this. Those people don't tend to do too well. You have to make a commitment. I'm not going to do this anymore. Just like an alcoholic. You don't tell an alcoholic you can drink on the weekends. You don't tell a smoker you can smoke on the weekends. You stop doing it. Esselstyn continues, you only see heart disease in the countries where they eat a lot of meat and oils. Coronary artery disease is a food-borne illness. Coronary artery disease is a toothless paper tiger. It need never exist. You can take control of your health with a low-fat vegan diet with no oil. You can make yourself heart attack proof. You no longer need to have the sword of Damocles hanging over your head. Low-fat vegan diet has 0% morbidity and 0% mortality. He also said every single patient who actually followed his diet, they never again had a recurrent cardiovascular event, meaning no heart attacks and no strokes. And when you avoid coronary artery disease, you also minimize your risk of ever getting things like atrial fibrillation, congestive heart failure. Nathan Pritikin, fat is bad. I've actually had some really smart internal medicine doctors tell me the two most useful things ever said in the history of nutrition are McDougall saying we need to eat a starch-based diet and Pritikin saying fat is bad. Pritikin reviewed all the literature on fat, and the conclusion he came to, this was back like in the early 1980s, he said, it's impossible to be too low in fat. It's impossible to be too low in protein. Every type of fat causes problems for people, so you just want to get the minimal amount that you get from plant foods. In studies with controlled diets, people could eat 0.75% or less of their calories, 0.75% of their calories from fat, and they did very well, and it was just omega-6 fats. We need a lot more omega-6s than we need omega-3s. So that's extraordinary. Less than 1%. Okay? And then also he looked at protein, and there's actually, McDougall looked at protein too. There's something called the Golden Study where they're feeding these starvation patients. And they found that for feeding the starvation patients, they only needed to feed them 2.5% of calories from protein. So you need almost next to nothing in protein. It's like impossible to be too low in fat or too low in protein with any naturally chosen diet of whole plant foods. It's impossible. Okay, Claper, the paleo-keto diet is self-inflicted eugenics. You can't do just one thing. Anything you do affects other systems. Olive oil is not good for you. Dean Ornish, it's better to make big changes than small changes because big changes generate big results, and that increases motivation. Roy Swing, Central Norway eats a lot of saturated fat, and they have a lot of MS. They got a lot of dairy in Central Norway. Coastal Norway eats much less saturated fat, and they have much less MS. And it can't just be due to latitude because there's not that much difference in latitude between coastal Norway and central Norway. Okay, the Chinese diet is mostly rice. It's very low in fat. I don't think there were any patients with MS in China. He went to China about 1960 and there weren't any, they couldn't find him a multiple sclerosis patient. Whereas in the Western countries, it's a pretty common disease. Okay, John McDougall, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. Yeah, I see MS patients pretty much every day. So it's not super common, but it's common. John McDougall, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. Jeff Nelson, the fat in nuts is also bad for blood flow. The benefits of omega-3 fats are exaggerated. You don't need extra dietary fat to absorb nutrients. Okay, he's got a lot of good videos at his channel, the Veg Source. Michael Brownlee, PhD, excessive dietary fat causes reversal of electron transport in mitochondria. This causes insulin resistance. So he wrote a great paper on insulin resistance. It's called Unifying Theory of Diabetic Complications. It's in the American Diabetic Association website, and you can get the journal article. You can even watch, if you sign up for their website, you give them your email, you can even watch him lecture on it. It's the greatest paper ever written on diabetes. Like I said, it's so magnificent and beautiful. I cried when I read it. It's just like, oh my God, this is perfect. This is awesome. What a life achievement. He had diabetes. He's trying to save his own life, so he devoted his life to studying it, and he's a genius, and it's great. Gerald Shulman, MD, PhD, another diabetes researcher genius. He said, with nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, we have confirmed that excess fat in skeletal muscle is the main cause of insulin resistance. They call it intramyocellular lipid. We call this the ectopic fat theory of diabetes. He's got a great lecture. He won the Banting Award in 2018 as the best diabetes researcher in the world. He was over at Yale at that time. And his lecture, you can watch it on YouTube. You type in Banting 2018 lecture, Gerald Shulman, you'll see it. It's a magnificent lecture. Michael Brownlee had won the Banting Award in 2004. Okay, here's a quote from Michael Greger. There are two types of doctors, vegans and those who have not yet read the nutritional literature. Okay, William Roberts, quote, when you feed them a high-fat diet, all herbivores will get atherosclerosis. Humans are herbivores. Okay, so that's the point too. If you've eaten the high-fat diet, the SAD diet, you know, the Mediterranean diet with meat and all that other junk in it, you're going to have atherosclerosis. That's why I think coronary artery calcium screening is stupid, because you already know you got it. You don't need to get a test. You know you have it. You've eaten the diet that causes it. So start fixing the problem with low-fat vegan diet. Eggs are what you feed an animal to cause atherosclerosis. Okay, Pete Rogers here. There's no such thing as good fats except secret fat. Fiber is good fat. Fiber is safe fat. Unlike other fats, fiber protects you from leaky gut. Instead of settling, okay, so what happens is the fiber goes through your intestinal tract. It's not going to cause a leaky gut problem. Then it's converted into short-chain fatty acids in your colon, so you get what you need. You get the butyrate to make tight junctions, prevent leaky gut. Then the rest of it in the form of acetate and propionate, 2-carbon, 3-carbon, little short-chain fatty acids. They go up to the liver, and the liver makes whatever it wants out of them. You get enough omega-3s, omega-6s just from the low-fat plant food you eat. You don't need to seek them out. Instead of settling for being just less fat than your cousin, you should try to be the healthiest you could be. Okay, we got a couple more pages of these. T. Colin Campbell, animal protein is the most powerful cancer promoter. The vast majority of all cancers, cardiovascular disease, and other forms of degenerative disease can be prevented simply by eating a plant-based diet. In his laboratory, T. Colin Campbell, he wrote the great book China Study. He found that you could basically turn cancer on and off in his lab animals, like rodents, by just increasing or decreasing the amount of animal protein. So the smart move is if you got cancer, don't eat any animal protein. Zero, none. Walter Kempner, low protein diet lowers the workload on kidneys. Yeah, he was curing patients with advanced kidney failure way back in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s before the dialysis was even an option. James Mitchell, PhD, the less protein an animal eats, the longer it lives. And that seems to be true for humans too. So Caloric restriction doesn't sound like fun. You got to starve yourself. Protein restriction is more promising, but you still wonder what can you eat. You can eat low protein foods, and they now even think you could probably just restrict like one amino acid, methionine or something, and live a lot longer that way. Leonard Hayflick, human somatic cells, which is most cells in the body, but not your stem cells or your germ cells. Germ cells is your gonads, can only divide about 60 times before they die. That's called the Hayflick limit, and that's why you don't want to be accelerating mTOR all the time with meat, for example, because it's got more leucine, for example, methionine and iron. Because you accelerate the rate at which cells replicate, you're reaching death. Your little hourglass that you turn over expires faster. You don't want to do that. Dean Ornish, plant-based diets and stress management help to maintain telomeres, and this slows aging, delays arrival at the Hayflick limit. Okay, because the reason you get the Hayflick limit is that each time a cell divides, the end of the chromosome shortens, and eventually it shortens into the genes that the cell needs to live. So if you can slow down the rate of cell chromosome shortening, you live longer. And if you can repair your telomeres, they're like little, the plastic crimped down things at the end of a shoelace. If you can repair those telomeres, then the cell will take longer to get to its Hayflick limit. So that's a win. You'll slow down aging. You'll age better, live longer. Anthony J., there's already a truckload of negative papers on soy. Soy is like one of the most billions of dollars I spent on promoting soy. Okay, it's the most overhyped food on the internet. Give me a break. Go read the old papers on it, and you won't be so eager for it. And it's like all these stupid people. You think the system's set up for you? No one cares about you. You're just a proll, a plebeian vermin as far as the billionaires are concerned. Do you think they're going to subsidize soy because it's good for you? No, they subsidize it because it's profitable and it'll help to sterilize you. Same thing with corn. Why do you think non-organic corn is sterilized? So they can spray atrazine on it, and it's estrogenic and it's a mitochondria inhibitor. It's toxic stuff. Okay. All right. Soy is estrogenic. There's other problems with soy too. It's real high in fat. It's real high in protein. It's processed with hexane. Okay, Peter Rogers quote, animal protein is more leucine and methionine than plant protein. Animal foods are also high in fat and in iron. All of these things activate mTOR. mTOR causes accelerated rates of cell replication. It accelerates arriving at the Hayflick limit. You speed up aging. Not only that, you speed up cancer growth. It's all bad. You don't want that at all. Miscellaneous quotes. Chef AJ, eat your veggies first. If it's in your house, it's in your mouth. So you eat your veggies first to stretch your stomach for their low caloric density, and you make the person healthier. Okay, then we did the Greger quote. Richard Moore, the reason black people have so much hypertension is because they don't eat enough potassium, because they eat tons of processed food. They hardly eat anything that's unprocessed, hardly any plant foods. Populations who eat a plant-based diet, they've got the same blood pressure in their teens and their 70s. Richard Moore is the guy who wrote that magnificent book, High Blood Pressure Solution, the best book ever written about hypertension. He spent his whole life researching plasma membrane ion pumps and their relationship to hypertension. Okay, Dennis Burkett, if you have small stools, you'll need a big hospital. No animal except modern man eats more sodium than potassium. Plant foods have a lot more potassium than sodium. Better to turn off the faucet than to mop up the floor. So he's basically saying it's better to prevent the disease than to have to treat it. McDougall, give cure a chance. Start with diet therapy. You can always try the pills later. People should eat a low-protein diet. Yeah, McDougall showed people how to cure disease. He showed people what causes disease and how to cure it. There it is. He's the greatest doctor who ever lived. He did that. Okay, he taught you need a starch-based diet. He taught you that coronary artery disease, hypertension, autoimmune disease, and diabetes can routinely be cured by just eating a low-fat starch diet. Okay, low-fat starch diet. That's great. It's not inevitable. You have to get those diseases. I can tell you almost all regular patients have those diseases. When I hear patients over 55, I don't even look on the chart. I just know they're going to be hypertensive, diabetic with coronary artery disease, cerebral vascular atherosclerosis. It's just a given. Okay, Dr. McDougall, it's the food. Okay, and other people now say that as well. Most common cause of autoimmune disease is leaky gut. The body is always trying to heal. Just get out of the way. Don't do things to block it, and the body can heal on its own. Like the Voltaire quote, the doctor amuses the patient while the body heals itself. The treadmill stress, here's McDougall again. The treadmill stress test is a conveyor belt to the cardiac cath lab and the operating room. At 5 years, coronary stents and CABG, coronary artery bypass graft, open heart surgery, they do not increase longevity at all. Zero. With asymptomatic patients, there is a 0% benefit from screening colonoscopy. Colon polyps often regress when a person changes their diet. If you want to get the cure, you've got to avoid the cause. Most of the time, avoiding what causes the disease is how you cure the patient. Dean Ornish, vegetarian diet and stress management enabled men with biopsy-proven low-grade cancer, prostate cancer, to lower their PSAs, prostate-specific antigen, the blood test for prostate cancer, or to at least keep it from increasing. So that was a big landmark study. Ruth Heidrich, PhD. The most common cause of disease is ignorance. It only took me 2 hours to become a vegan after talking to Dr. McDougall. Okay, Lorraine, lady, Dr. Day, you aren't sick because you have cancer. You have cancer because you are sick. You need to learn about God's way of healing. Drugs don't work. God's way is free, and it works much better. Okay, and then there's a lady nutrition coach, and she said, you don't have to be wealthy to be healthy. Yeah, all these starches are cheap, and they store well, and you can eat 90% of your food from starch, so you can eat pretty cheap and be really healthy. Okay, anonymous quote. I told the patient to drink some fluids and get some rest, so he got drunk and passed out. Okay, then here's a quote by the the philosophers. The first wealth is health. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Schopenhauer said something almost exactly the same. Thomas Jefferson, every day he went for a long walk and he felt that was tremendously beneficial to his health. Jack Delatorre, chronic cerebral hypoperfusion, or I call that a mouse equivalent because he was tying off the carotid artery in the mouse neck, is the most common cause of dementia. It's also called the vascular hypothesis of dementia. He wrote a great book called Alzheimer's Turning Point. Okay, internet viewer said to me, they knew, and by they knew he meant the medical establishment, from the Sweeney paper in 1927 that diabetes was caused by dietary fat. That was about 100 years ago. Lots of researchers have confirmed that, like Hemsworth, Kempner, Pritikin, McDougall, Brownlee, Taylor, and Shulman, so it's been confirmed by multiple researchers, and they never tell us. It's not in our books. I've been giving these patients bullshit drugs for decades with no chance of a cure. The patients are never cured by drugs. Pills are poisons. If I had known about the vegan diet, I could have at least cured some of them. Okay, last page of nutrition, great quotes here. This one is me, Pete Rogers. You don't cure a disease by taking a picture of it. You can cure many of the chronic diseases, almost all of them, with a low-fat vegan diet with no oil. But if you ate, for example, if you ate the SAD diet, you, as most of us did, you already know you got coronary artery disease. You don't need to radiate your chest with a screening cardiac CT for calcification to find that out. You already know it. So why not just do the diet, okay? You go work in any hospital, you see almost no one takes the stairs for exercise. You'll see in the cafeteria at most hospitals there's hardly any, if any, good food. Okay, even when it's 10 degrees below zero, all the ignorant patients will show up for meaningless ultrasound and CT follow-ups, like ultrasound of a kidney cyst, a benign kidney cyst, or CT follow-up of a micronodule, which almost never turns into anything. But none of them will want to become a low-fat vegan, and that's the only thing that could cure them of most of their chronic diseases. The difference between the health outcomes in a low-fat diet, low-fat vegan diet versus a SAD diet, standard American diet, it's not even close. It's not like a 5-4 match, double overtime. No, it's 100-0. There is no hypertension, atherosclerosis, coronary artery disease in a person who eats these low-fat plant diets all their life. Whereas in people who eat these high-fat, meat, fried food, processed food diets, they all have atherosclerosis. Okay, the internal medicine textbooks are all wrong. They never say what causes a disease. They're just designed to sell drugs. Typical medical textbooks will say, well, we know that hypertension, atherosclerosis, coronary artery disease, diabetes, it's associated with aging. Seems to be part genetic. Sometimes due to socioeconomic disparity and racism. That sounds, isn't that thoughtful? Isn't that nice? No, it's a crock of BS. You look at, for example, the paper in Lancet Journal, 1929, authors Donaldson, 1,800 consecutive admissions to a hospital. They checked their blood pressure in Kenya. What was the incidence of hypertension? In the United States, it would be at least 75% of all the blacks. Okay? In Kenya, 1929, it was 0%. None of them. So it's not genetic. They eat a plant-based diet, they don't get hypertension. In the USA, a lot of blacks eat tons of processed food. Okay, they don't eat hardly any plant foods, whole foods. Okay, and there's a lot of other things like that. Like I said, Swank went to China in the 1960s. They couldn't find a single patient with multiple sclerosis. Before 1958, there was not a single case of rheumatoid arthritis described in Africa when they're eating plant-based diets. You go to China where they eat the rice diet, 1 billion out of 1 billion are skinny. Okay. I learned that from Dr. McDougall. And I look at a Bruce Lee movie, everybody's skinny except for Bolo because he's taking steroids. Okay, the internal medicine textbooks are all wrong. Let's see, they're just designed to sell drugs. Yeah, I rewrote the textbooks to tell people what causes disease. You got to know the cause so you can avoid it. It's like Dr. McDougall says, you have to avoid the cause to get the cure. And so I wrote those books, but almost nobody knows about them. I'm totally shadow, bond. Okay, they don't want the pros knowing the truth about stuff. Okay, I learned a lot about disease causation from Dr. McDougall. He's the best doctor who ever lived. He focused on explaining the disease to patients. I've taken it farther in a sense that I've gone and figured out, looked up, learned the biochemistry and molecular biology of these diseases, because he just wanted to explain stuff to patients so he could motivate them to eat the right diet and help them to get better. I was pretty much more interested in talking to doctors and getting them to understand what's going on. Plus, I was a little pissed off. Some of my ideas, I couldn't get them published in the mainstream journals because they don't generate money and they actually, promote diet, which they don't like, vegan diet. So I just started writing books on my own. Then my books, are ignored. So my friends tell me, well, make a YouTube channel. And that's how I ended up doing all this. Let's see. The doctors, they don't know anything about NETs, N-E-T-S, nutrition, epidemiology, toxicology, then all the things that start with S. Spirituality, meaning religion. Religious people are healthier. The details of sleep, of the value of sunshine, having a sense of purpose, sedentary versus exercise, maintaining social support. My supply and demand theory of neurodegeneration, it's the best theory of dementia. The mismatch between glucose and oxygen delivery versus the metabolic rate, as well as other things that affect energy production. Like if you have mitochondria inhibitors, you're not going to be able to generate the energy to pump calcium out of the cytoplasm. So I call that the supply and demand theory. I also had previously called it neurovascular uncoupling, but supply and demand is easier to understand. That's important to know because Alzheimer's is a fake disease, sporadic Alzheimer's. Okay. You need a big theory to encompass disease causation, and the value of a good theory is it tells you what to do. Avoid mitochondria inhibitors, avoid SERCA inhibitors, avoid excitotoxins, avoid diabetogens, avoid atherogens. Okay. Most nutrition doctors focus on the heart, but I focus on the brain, and the brain's a lot fussier than the heart. It's more than food. To optimize health, you really need to know some toxicology. You need to know about these things: excitotoxins, mitochondria inhibitors, SERCA inhibitors, peroxynitrite generators. They're all doing the same thing, pushing the cell towards cell death, apoptosis. And quite often a person will have 10, 20 problems, but they'll all be fixable, but they need to know them so they can fix them. If you plug up your arteries with a bad diet, no medical, surgical, bullshitology technology is going to save you. And the system doesn't care about saving you. A patient cured is a patient lost, okay? Is a customer lost. So you got to learn how to cure yourself. It's usually not that hard. Most things, just learn the diet, avoid the toxins, get some exercise, get some sleep, manage your stress. It's not rocket science. Okay, let's see. A lot of people tell me, oh, their grandpa smoked, drank, ate meat, lived till 90. That's great. But my response to that would be, if you had 100 blind people and you had them cross a busy street, some of them would make it to the other side, but that doesn't mean it's a good idea. Moderation is for mediocrities. Extremes are for excellence. Anybody who's great at anything is extreme about it. Yeah, you want to be extreme about health, extreme about eating the best diet, extreme about... See, the average pro always seeks, the safe place in the middle of the pack. But, if you want to be healthy, you got to be low-fat vegan, no oil, and that makes you already, an outlier, okay, etc. What's the healthiest way to live? Like Adam and Eve, but keep your indoor heating and plumbing. Ischemic spine is the most common cause of back pain. The big F minus fluoride will contribute to it as well by disrupting the hydrogen connection bonds. Glyphosate will also make it worse because it can damage collagen. It's like glycine phosphate. A phosphate stuck on a glycine amino acid, and it can substitute for the glycines, and it can intercalate itself into proteins. Collagen is about 1/3 of the proteins in our body, so it can weaken these ligaments. Anonymous quote here: conventional medicine is just mass deal to the pill, send a bill. Dentistry is drill 'em, fill 'em, and bill 'em. If you eat a low-fat vegan diet, no doctor. If you don't eat a low-fat vegan diet, no doctor can save you. And if you do eat a low-fat vegan diet, you probably don't need a doctor. So, anyways, I hope that was helpful.